I did it. It's working great. Can you all hear me okay? Perfect. So, welcome. My name is Sita, and welcome to this artist talk that we are hosting today together with WERC. Nicky Assmann will be with us. And before we start, maybe you have been here before because this is actually the 4th edition, right? Maybe you've been here before and you kind of know the drill. Maybe you're super new to this. So I'll give a little bit of context for you to know what we are engaging in. So first of all, it is the 4th edition. So the Artist Talks for WERC is a place where they get to invite people and artists that are very close to their heart, that are inspiring, that they met throughout the years, right? That you're very inspired by. And this evening is for you to kind of become part of that conversation and also to have the opportunity to ask your own questions. So Nicky will be up here in a little bit, and I will also invite you to ask questions that you might have so that you can also be part of the conversation. So whether you're an emerging artist or maybe you're just very interested in what Nicky is doing from a different perspective, all questions are welcome. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. I'll look into the audience at times just to make sure that I don't miss someone. So that first of all, and then a little bit about me, because you might think, why is she here? So my name is Sita. I work at V2, Lab for the Unstable Media, which is an interdisciplinary center for art and media technology, which is based in Rotterdam, so different side of the Netherlands. And I don't know if you know V2, but what we do normally at V2 is that we produce work, we present work, we archive the work, and we publish work that's kind of at the interface of art, technology, and society. So in that sense, we are kind of also aligned with our practices. And WERC has also been doing some residencies with us, like way in the past. So that's also how we know each other. I'm a project manager at V2. So that kind of entails that I work with the artists and residents that come in, that work with us. So I'm there from the beginning of the work until the presentation of the work, which is always really nice because I get to see a lot of growth. And just learning about their artwork in themselves when artists are working. So that's something that I really like to do. So in that sense, it's great that I get to ask Nicky questions about her practice today. And next to that, I think maybe for WERC, because I don't know if you've known WERC before, but the people who are very new to WERC and what WERC does. So they're an interdisciplinary art collective, which is made up of 3 central guys. Of course, you have other people working as well, but I'll invite Olaf in a little bit to explain a little bit more. And they focus mostly on designing and developing media art in relation to nature, theater, science, and technology. So I think Nicky's practice fits in well, and I'm going to invite Olaf actually up into the stage to explain maybe a little bit about why you chose to invite Nicky for today's talk. What inspired you?
Thanks. There's one artwork in particular that I found very interesting looking at Nicky's website, and I still struggle how to explain what triggers me on this. So I'm still going to try, so bear with me. But Nicky has been on our radar on and off for a long period of time. She's been going to similar festivals, so we saw a lot of the artworks there. And I am trying to give you guys at least the way how I sort of see Nicky and the artworks she makes through my eyes. So maybe, Nicky, I'm completely wrong. You can also tell me that. But if, Alicia, can you please press spacebar? So this is an artwork from you from 2008, I think. It's a human swarm. And we at WERC, some people might know Pixie, Lily, Tane, all of these things have to do with emergent behavior and with Boids. And there was a scientist called Greg Reynolds that developed a Boid. And it's a system where you have a simple computer rule and you repeat that rule and you get emergent behavior. You get swarms of birds. You get the beautiful things you see when you see sparrows, a flock. And this was something that was also really intriguing to me, and I couldn't quite grasp how you would program those things and how you would interface with that. And then Nicky came along and made one that, I think you see the rules up here. So it is a performance. It is the analog version of a digital representation of a bird, if I may put it in that sort of a weird loop. A flock of birds, sorry, yes. So I'm talking about one Boyd is one bird, and the flock is the Boyd system. So she gave all these people rules, and I think the rules were just described, but it's something like don't get too close to your neighbor, try to follow the directions they are going, all of those type of things. And I thought this was such a smart and playful way of getting your fingers into these things that is actually a highly digital way of mimicking natural behavior. And that, to me, sort of gave me a little glimpse into the mind of what I think you do, because I think you're an artist, but you're also a scientist. And you're somebody that has a sense of wonder to the world, that you discover and that you investigate through the means of science and to material properties and through rules in nature. So I think your art practice, from my perspective on at least, is really helping us come to terms with all these rules we have in nature and the world around us. And I think you were never going to show this work, because the other works have I feel like have a similar mentality, trying to understand the world around us, trying to find the material properties, and then bringing those to a next level that helps us understand nature and science and art in sort of a weird mix of things. But you're all going to see those words. So I think that's why I wanted to show you guys this one.
Shall we call her on stage?
Most definitely.
Yes, come on up, Nicky. Welcome.
Thanks, and thanks for those words. Nice. Yeah.
It's funny because when you were sharing this piece of work and talking about it, it actually really touched upon something that I also found very interesting about your work, which led me to this first question, is that I read somewhere in a book about your work, also that got published, that you had when you were a child this kind of like this expansive mind experience, or an experience that you kind of gave you some insight about what it means to be human, what perception is. And looking also at the work that Olaf shared and thinking through what perception does, like figuring out how the world around us works. I'm super curious, like, would you want to share something of that with us? Because somehow it's also part of a lot of your works that you create.
Yeah, I think the experience you refer to that was written in the book that I remember is that I was a young child, like 6, 7, and I think I learned about the concept of God. And I was walking down the stairs, and in walking down the stairs, I was like, but what does that mean? And where is, like, is he then in the cosmos, right? And then I started to think about the cosmos, and then I was like I couldn't grasp the enormity or the immensity of the cosmos. I was like, what? But so for my little brain at that moment, it was too large, I couldn't grasp the context of it. And I started to think, like, but if there's somebody looking at us, are we also like our relation to ants? Like, are there more giants that are, so I don't know if you know this film Powers of 10. So it's like, but I was only 6, so it was a bit, I remember I had to sit down on the stairs, and in the Netherlands you have something called Jip en Janneke. And to block the thought, which was too much, I started yippee Janneke, like to sort of calm down, like, because I couldn't grasp the intensity or the immensity of this concept of space, but how big is it? And I remember that I read something last week about the multiverse, and that there's now a new thesis that for every possibility there's a different universe. And I was like, again, like, what? But how big, how, you know, so to relate to these different skills and to, but also in relation to like your body and then the world around you, then the earth, then the cosmos. So it's thinking about these different skills and how you relate to these skills. And I think this sense of being amazed and wonder, I think that is sort of what is still there, and that when I read or see or find something, then I'm like, but how? And like trying, so it's, and also what you say, it's like a way of, I'm not a programmer, so I don't use the flocking algorithm. But in order to understand it, I just have an analog approach of it, and then similar results occur. So I think it's a way of understanding the world around us or me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful that happened at such a young age, and then now looking at you and all of the beautiful works that you create, that also give a shift in perception somehow, the way that you create them. So it's interesting to hear that such an experience really also develops throughout your life.
Yeah, I think it's understanding or learning by doing or working with the material. And as I said, I'm not a programmer, or I'm not somebody who draws. So what I do is I experiment, and I just make prototypes, and I learn by doing, or I understand by doing.
Yeah. So another moment that you had to learn by doing, let's say, was also like a work that you created in 2011, was it? Solas? And that work was very interestingly also a work, it was not your first work, right? But it was a work that really launched you into the cultural sector, right? Because it got picked up by a lot of things and a lot of institutes, and there was a lot of, I think, a lot of media around it. And I'm curious, can you show us this work? Like, can you tell us a little bit about this work in 2011?
Yeah. So the work is Solace, which refers to like this moment of peace in stressful times. It was my graduation work, and it was back in, I did the Master of Art Science in The Hague, and I remember that the cutbacks in funding, especially in the sector I was going to work in, e-culture, back then. So I remember that for me, this work became like a direct reflection of it, like this, creating this moment of peace in times of stress. Hence the title. So what you're seeing is two soap film screens, and they're quite large, 3 by 4 meters, which is a reference to old cinema, the aspect ratio of old cinema. And so it's a machine, it's a soap film apparatus, and it lifts up these two screens of soap film. This is like a basin with soapy water with a special recipe. And already before you enter the space, you smell the soap. And when you enter, turn down the sound. When you enter, you see, of course, it's visually very dominant, but you also have the sound of the mechanics. And the humidity is quite high, 80%. So it's a very tactile work, and very much focused on all the senses that we have. Yeah, so this was my graduation piece, and I worked on it for 2 years, and I started with bubbles, of course. And then sort of along the way, it turned into this film, in a 2-dimensional film. And then it became like this intervention in space. And it's actually light work, so by using lights, I bring out the intrinsic colors of the soap film, the iridescent colors. And I just, this is a different light setting, that instead of having the walls lit out so you see the colors, you project light onto it and you get the reflections into the space. So then you're also, as the audience, touched by the light.
You said it took you 2 years to create this as your graduation work.
I think not 2 years to create this work, but to get to this work. So it starts with the research by playing with soap film. I first made a work that I took this jitterbug, this Buckminster Fuller model, and I stood in it and I wanted to stand inside of a soap bubble. And I remember when I did this performance, it completely, I did it 2 times and then the soap, like all the tubes got loose and it. But then I remember that at the end of the day, when the curtains were unlocked, the sunlight lit out the soap film, and then I saw the reflection on the wall in the space, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So then I knew the next step. So yeah, it sort of grew and developed, and like I have a background in film, so hence it became these 2 canvases of abstract film. And then it's a machine, so it's 2 screens. I chose 2 screens because it's not about showing only the phenomena, but also to compose with it. So it's making, having elements to compose with. So it's a machine, it's based on an algorithm, but then I make interventions in the algorithm. So it's like go up when you're up, stay up. When the soap bubble bursts, the machine knows it and goes down to pick up a new machine. And then sometimes I say, but now go down with the soap bubble. So then you get this 3-dimensional feeling of the soap bubble, because it's, instead of becoming flat, becomes circular or 3-dimensional again. This is when it bursts. And sometimes people start to blow on it. And
what was for you like this work, because it was your graduation work? What can you tell us something about what happened after your graduation? Like how did this work find its way into the world?
So during the exhibition of your piece, it got picked up, and then I got to show it in Basel and different countries. But I made it, and I so it was very unstable. Unstable media, it was definitely unstable media. So for 10 days I had to sit there, because anytime it could break and I had to fix it. But if you have to show it on, in an exhibition, it has to work, it has to be professional, right? So I had to rebuild immediately. And so what it did, it forced me to very quickly, you have to become more professional. So it has to be sturdy, it has to be more industrial, the soap gets everywhere, so the sensors have to be, you know, soap-proof. And so that was quite difficult, but yeah, it was also very good for, like, you have to build crates. If you, the first time it got transported, like these loose things, into a truck, but then the next time, you know, you have to build crates. So it's like, it forced me to be, yeah, to become more quickly than I anticipated professional. And so in that sense, it helped me to yeah, immediately take a step higher.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Also, that's the fact of like working with media and that it's inherently unstable. It's something that I see so much. It's like even when we have an exhibition on, someone's making something, always there will be a cable or there will be a little glitch, and then sometimes it works. And I think it's, yeah, it's super funny in a way to think about it, that it's always, it will bring up some kind of form of stress, and then all of a sudden it will work again, and it's...
Yeah, it's super stressful. So even when I rebuilt the work, it was still based on the first prototype, and it's basically like a reinvention of the curtain wheel. So it's not very practical. So it took me 5 days to install whenever I showed it around the world, so it was like 5 long days. So my writer also said, I need 5 days of 12 hours to install, and it was so complex that I couldn't explain to anybody how to do it for me with all the... So yeah, the work is no longer functioning, but I get asked still a lot to show it, so in my plans to rebuild, this is gonna be even more. It needs some renovation, yeah.
Great. Well, you already shared something about your background and also kind of where this work got birthed from, also like thinking through cinema. And I'm curious, like, what is your background? Like, because you said, okay, I went to the academy. What can you tell us something?
So I studied film science, and then after that I did a master in art science, which is like an interfaculty between fine arts and conservatory. So it's image and sound. And yeah, I think all these, those two things are still the base of my work. So yeah, I always work with color, light, and motion, but always with different media. So one time it's soap film, the other, like here, this is the work Turmer or Wervel. It's based here in Groningen, so some of you might have seen it. And these are flexible LED panels. So it's never like a fixed medium, but color, light, and motion, those are basically the principles they're all based on. And I think expanded cinema, which is basically to experiment with the different elements of the cinematic apparatus. So you have the traditional cinema, you have the projector, the screen, the canvas, the audience seated in a dark space. And what I do is, in the lineage of expanded cinema, which is basically to experiment with and play with these different elements. So I make my own screen, so from the soap film, or I choose installations because I like the audience to be free and to experience the work in itself. And it's always with light, so a lot of times I build my own lights. And then another thing is called synesthesia, which is basically the crossing of the senses. So a lot of my work deals with our senses, and I also like to play with them and to approach multiple, like it's visually dominant, but I also like to add smell or being touched by light, and yeah. And so basically the works are always these kinetic and sculptural, spatial installations, sometimes big, sometimes small. And then I work a lot with turbulence. So the soap film, this basically comes from the soap film, that like the better the recipe got, the more turbulent patterns I got. So in the beginning it were these color fields, but then later on these patterns started to appear, which like blew my mind. And also like the fluid dynamics of the soap and how it started to behave, and like these, in another work that I made with soap film, that these black dots, small black, were going upwards.
Sorry, I have a question. If it's all right. Yeah. You're saying it was almost an accident, like you saw the turbulent patterns in the soap, but in the thing that Olaf also showed, which was a couple of years earlier, you were also working with nature, with patterns in nature. So it almost, it's weird to me that it's not that it's a coincidence almost, because you seem to chase these patterns.
Yeah, but I think you realize that later. but in the beginning, it's like you're fascinated by it, but later you see, okay, there are some stable things, like hence the color, light, and the motion, and of course like the fluids and the chemical processes. But then you don't see it yet. So yeah.
It's also a good note about like talent development and like growing in your practice, right? Is that you kind of work through, and then in retrospect you look back at the works and you see that pattern, and when you're still building your practice, it's maybe something also that you're exploring and finding your inherent interest in it, like this is it for me, you know, and then you see how it kind of develops over the years and over the works.
Yeah, and I think like also this work, this is copper that I burn. So this also was by coincidence, in the sense that I saw the same frequency of colors, like in the iridescent soap films and the rainbows. And then I was trying to think, like, how can I make this into a work? And where all the works are about motion, this work was about being like a still work, but having the same color frequencies. So yeah, I think what I do a lot is like I work with materials and then I bring forward the intrinsic colors. So that's why I call it the hypercolors, and these are brought up by the different light settings. So it's always a light work, and it's always about bringing forward the color that it already has. And then I also work a lot with distorted reflections, which for me are like a way of having like this mirror, but then it's not like a correct mirror, it's like a distorted mirror. So it allows me to look differently at things because it's distorted. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. It creates new possibilities if you look at it from a different perspective or different scale, whether it's like zooming in or zooming out. This is my studio, by the way, which is not all my studio. It's it's a complex with 18 artists, and with 3 other artists we share a space within that space. And this is where we share this project space. It's the only dark space because we are the ones working with light. And here I can experiment and make setups and do prototypes and testing. And I make large-scale installations, but it's really difficult sometimes to imagine how something will work on a larger scale. So what I usually do is work small, then make a bigger step, then small again, and then test it in big, like with 1 unit. And this is how I try to tackle these. Like, will it also work on a larger scale? And then I work a lot with chemicals. This is making the soap recipe in Taiwan. I couldn't export, or how do you say, transport all the soap, the recipe, so I had to have powder form and then remake it there.
That's a lot of experimentation that you then go through, right?
Yeah,
like
because some of the chemicals were not allowed in, but that's another story. But that's also, like I showed the piece once, the ideal temperature for the soap films is 18 degrees Celsius. And then I showed it in an exhibition space that had a broken air conditioning, so it was 38 degrees. And the night before the opening, I was still working till late, and I had to change something in the recipe in order to make it work, because it was working. And then I did something which worked. And then, like, for the opening, it was working fine. It was like 30. They managed to fix the air conditioning on that day, but it was not 18. So it also forces you, it's stressful, but it also forces you to know the material better and experiment, basically. So this is burning the copper and using chemicals.
Is that something that, like, when you, for instance, like burning copper is something very specific, is it something that you had knowledge about before, how to do that, or is it something that you figure out when you think, okay, I want to try it out, and then...
Yeah, so I never stick with something, so, which is nice in the sense that you always do something new, but it also means you have to reinvent basically what are the properties, the difficulties, and once you know it, you move on and you start with something new. But here, like I said, I saw this one picture of which was copper, but on a molecular base, and it had the same color frequency as the soap films. And then this triggered me to figure out how I can do it on a larger. And it's probably been done many times before, but for me it was like a way of reaching the same color patterns and frequencies, but in a different material.
Yes, interesting, because you expand your practice through every work that you make. Like, there's a new material and then there's a new practice around it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what I also do a lot is, or not a lot, but to do artists in residence. And so the soap film works, I made 3 soap film works, and they're part of a triptych. And they each show a different element of the soap. And while working on the second installation, I saw this film that you see the freezing of a soap bubble. And I thought, oh, you can freeze it. How? And so I did experiments in this freezer where they made fish food. In the Netherlands, it had the right temperature, -30 degrees, but also a lot of blowers. So my soap bubbles or soap films would burst before they could freeze. And then somebody told me there's an artist in residence in the north of Finland. It's like a biostation. And there you have these temperatures of -30 degrees. So there I went to try and see. We'll speak about it later. Yeah, and I combine a lot of exhibitions, and then once you're there, you can also decide to travel around and see some of the nature. So when we showed work in the US, I'm also part of a collective called Macular. We're with 6 artists, and we all come from the same background of art science, and we make work dealing with perception. And so we had a show in the US, and I wanted to go to the national parks to see the nature. And so for me, these are canyons that have been eroded through because of water. So for me, this is also like a form of inspiration, and yeah.
Yeah, so field research and really looking into natural places and parks in this case is really, it's something where you find inspiration, or how do you, is it something that you kind of like look for, or is it something that kind of you go somewhere and you feel drawn to a place and then inspiration comes, or is there a process for that?
I think it happens in multiple ways, in the sense like it can be as simple as like reflections from water onto a bridge, or like, and then it catches your eye. And sometimes it's like this new scientific research that's like I find very, like usually I don't know anything about, like when I start with the work, I usually don't know anything about it, just this one specific thing which triggered me to find out more about it. And so it also means I start fresh, and I'm not limited by any constrictions of like you cannot do this, or you can't do this with it. Or so also with the soap film, I was not restricted by any knowledge, which also means that you can think of things that are maybe less common, or approach it in a different way.
Yeah, I think interdisciplinary, or coming at something from a different angle and different perception, really helps opening up the possibilities for it. Yeah, I'm also curious, like in traveling around, because there's something in your work that's very nature oriented, or looking at natural phenomena and processes, and at the same time, getting to know you a little bit, I also understand that you are also working and thinking through what the climate, kind of the impact of the climate has on us and us as human beings, our perception, how landscapes shift. Like, is that like traveling around and looking at landscapes, is that also something that informs like your relationship to the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think the first work were very formalistic in a sense, right? Like it's dealing with shapes and space and architecture, and thinking about measurements and making a composition for it. Like that's always the main goal. But I think in these travels, like the artist in residence that we did, that I just talked about, we made a film. So it's a work that me and another artist, also part of the Macular collective, Joris Strijbos, we made the film Liquid Solid, which is about the freezing of a soap film. And when we were there, it was the Arctic landscape, the subarctic landscape, and it was in the period of the polar night, so it's the moment that the sun doesn't rise above the horizon. And this is, by the way, the setup, really simple. I'm thinking if there's a... So when we were there, we were also walking through the landscape, and then it's the part also where the Sami people reside, and one of the Sami people told us that the snow was no longer as much as it used to be, because we were able to walk simple, right, without... and also the temperatures were supposed to be -30, but when we arrived it was -12, so first I thought my project would fail. It didn't. But, oh yeah, you also had the aurora. But yeah, I think next to this we also visited some deserts and national parks, and it does make you more aware, and by being there and talking to local people, and yeah. So I think also Liquid Solid became, in the end, like it was like this very scientific research experiment, but then it also became like a film about the melting of the ice and the changing of the landscape, and we used for the soundtrack, so it's it became a video installation because how are you going to bring back this moment, this very ephemeral moment of freezing of the soap film? So we decided to make a film about it in which the sound and the visual are both equally important. And for the soundscape, we also used the sound of the singing of the whales, which were in that area eating at that moment. But like the warming of the sea now is now a good period for the whales because there's a lot of algae because it's getting warmer. So like I really like whales, so I was really happy for this. But it's like also an indication that it's not a good thing. So yeah, we used all these different elements in the film. This is a small teaser of it. So the video installation itself is like 18 minutes long, and the first part you saw is the part where it's minus 12 degrees. So the soap film wasn't freezing, but it became very like the viscosity became like syrupy, but it resulted in these very organic patterns that like slowly, like in 12 minutes, would sink to the bottom. And then the second part would be at the end of the 2-week residency, it became like minus 25, which turned out to be enough for the freezing of the soap film. And so it's the same soap film, but now it's minus 25, and where all the colors suddenly disappear and you start to get these fractalized or crystallized ice patterns to appear.
It's completely different,
yeah.
The look of this, wow. And because this is a work that you made with Joris Strijbos, who is also part of the collective.
Of the
right?
Makkelijk collective, yeah.
Yeah. Is there like in working together with him, maybe in particular, like how is that relationship? Like, what does it bring to your practice working together?
So I think, like I said, coming from art science, which is basically like a combination of sound and image with the working in sound and image, so it's both fine arts and I think a lot of focus was there on working together, collaborating. So it was not so much about working alone and about your own personal but so I think this way of working always stuck with me, and so yeah, I think in all my works I have collaborations either with other artists or with engineers or programmers, or so the works are never, well, almost never made completely alone. Yeah, and so I think this way of working, and also in a collective where you share knowledge and you share also stress. Like having an exhibition together is much more fun than having stress alone the night before the opening. So yeah, I really like this way of working, and yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it also brings in kind of fresh perspective on, like you say, someone who comes at a work or maybe something you're developing, brings in a fresh perspective, also opens up new opportunities again to see how the work can develop. Or
I think with in collaborating you have much quicker feedback on what do I think about it, but you also have much more discussion, because you have to sometimes make compromises. Yeah, and I think with yours, yeah.
So when you go to the artist in residence location, for example, in Finland, you work on a plan beforehand, but how does the being there affect the art piece itself? How does it evolve when you are there? How does the plan change?
Yeah. So, like, for instance, with this work, the idea was to do experiments and then return to this freezer in the Netherlands and then make the film there, like really professional. And then when we got there, and so first it was like, oh, it's not going to work because it's not cold enough. And then when we got there, we realized, no, this is great. And we're never going to mimic this in a freezer. This is perfect because there's a moment in the second part of the film when it's freezing that you also see this flickering of the, and it's actually the wind blowing the soap film. So suddenly everything got condensed into that moment, and we realized we have to do it now, because we're not going to recreate these conditions in a freezer or a studio or so yeah, we had often frozen feet. Yeah. And another thing which was really nice is the aurora, which was like also amazing to see, but also like a direct relation with the soap films and the colors, and yeah, that was yeah. So what I like about these artists in residence is very condensed, and you are there, and you have to focus and do it now. Yeah, it's a very good way of working.
Yeah, in a way, having that aurora there and then seeing these images have a lot of resemblance of like what you shared, like the multiverse. Like you have like the macro version of something and then the micro version, and you zoom in and out, and then you're making this work while that is like shining on you. It's but
beautiful. It's also in the soap film, because this is like a zoom in of like the so it's like a even smaller version. So for me, these were like little cells. So the black spots I was talking about, they were going upwards. I was like, why are they going upwards? So it's like it's anti-gravity for me, but I later realized, there's no soap there, it's more light, so that's why it's going upwards. But for me, these are like, it's like a cellular level, and then this is the same soap film, but a different moment, and then suddenly it becomes like this a constellation in space, right? Like this nebula, or, yeah. So these different scales and, yeah, this recurrence of patterns on different levels, whether it's like micro, macro, or cosmic, I really like this recurrence of patterns and imagery, yeah.
It's beautiful. And after this, as I understood, you did not a residency, but more like a long-term research project, right? Something called Dark Ecology, where you also looked at a long-term research on different points of lands, different countries as well.
Yeah, so Dark Ecology was a 3-year research project. It was initiated by Sonic X and a Norwegian curator, Hilde Metty. And so the idea was to go up north, which at that time there was a lot of speculation on the melting on the ice, which would allow for this cheaper way of shipping cargo. So this is actually an image of a factory, Nickel, in the small village of Nickel in Russia, which is half an hour away from the Norwegian village we visited, Kirkenes. And I don't know if it's like Kirkenes is the typical romantic Norwegian houses and fjords, and this was like half an hour away from this, where you had literally black snow from the nickel coming from the factory. And it became like this wasteland. So the project was about the climate change, and it took 3 years. And in 3 years, a group of 40 people, of artists, theorists, writers, came to the same location, but each in a different season, and learn about this thing of climate change. And for me, this was really like an eye-opener. And reading all these texts by James Lovelock, who now passed away, he invented the Gaia theory, the concept of the Earth being whole and with the atmosphere and Timothy Morton, who coined the concept of dark ecology, but also Donna Haraway. And it was very inspiring, but it also led to a lot of anxiety and feelings of despair and depression. So I think, yeah, in realizing this, you cannot unrealize, and then you have to deal with it. So after a while, I think I started to implement it in my work and thinking about how can I convey these feelings of despair, like where Solace was like a work about hope, in a sense, or maybe troost, solace, yeah. And so now came more these feelings of despair, and then I think, yeah, I had to find a way to deal with it.
Would you say that working, because this was 3 years, right? So it was like on and off, you visited different spaces.
Yes, and also like the same with the residents in the north of Finland, where we realized about the changing of the climate and the influence it had on the local people there. Yeah, I think these things combined in the, yeah.
Would you say that like creating art, or maybe because it's your practice, like creating something through your experiences, and then you call that art or work, like did that help you with finding a way to be with these feelings?
So I make abstract art, and there's no words and there's no representation in image, or so. I think I approach it more like from, like the same with music, that you can convey a feeling, and I think it taps into having these shared feelings because more people have these feelings. So I think in the work that I made after this started to, I think every work is always about a lot of things, because it's like you have all these inputs, and then it goes through a mesh and then it comes out. So I started to think about time, like our time here on this earth. What, like the memory I shared about being a child, zooming out is sort of for me a way of putting things more into perspective. So it creates distance, so also from your feelings. So I just started to look at different planets and different time scales, and that, you know, in the whole concept of things, we're like this tiny, so does it really matter? You know, you start to find ways to deal with it. And I think I started to look at the sun, because all the works basically, then I realized that I always try to mimic the sun, because I'm basically always trying to work with a light that's sort of like a point light source. That's the best way to bring forward the colors. And so this is, by the way, a solar power station, which I really like, because this tower feels to me like this the conductor, which like directs all the mirrors. And then because of these travels, I was also inspired by land art from the 70s. This one I really liked. To relate to these planets and to other worlds. And so I started to build a telescope which traces the sun throughout the place where it's situated, so based on the coordinates and the time and the dates. And it became like a work that it wasn't intended to look like a light cannon, but it became a light cannon, and so it follows the sun throughout the space, throughout the day, and it shoots back light. And it's like a very small metaphor of like trying to shoot back some light, some heat. Yeah, and in the same sense, it's a piece like I'm making my own projector here, and like it's like you have the lamp, you have the lenses, you have the color wheel, you have the mirror cone, and then the final lens to make the projection. These are some of the tests. this is a work with sound. It's a composition made by Dries Depoorter also, or a sound score, and it's a lot more eerie. than, so I think here those feelings of like also this projection of the sun, or it's not the sun, but it's shooting back like the sun, combined with this sound score. I mean, I think this conveys more these feelings that I had. But still, it's a shared space, and people can be in there together, and then also share these feelings, which sort of allows for like a form of entanglement, or yeah.
So in a way, the sound that we hear and the work itself, if people see, when was it concluded? How long ago was that?
This was back in 2016. This work I made in 2018.
2018. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you notice now, like, because we're a few years later now, like how do you find these experiences, maybe of the climate and the weather changing? Is it still part of your work, or is it maybe more in the background now, or how do you relate to it now?
No, I think it's still it's been a recurring theme, and the work I made after, which is the work Wervel, Turmoil, also dealt with this. And then it was like I tried to. Here are some pictures of the abyss still. So this is the sculpture. This is the inside with the color wheels. It's nice to show it in different places. Chapels work really well. This is a French castle from the 12th century, so yeah. Yeah, so when I got asked to make this is the first permanent piece I made, and I wanted to make a work that uses the concept of turbulence, like you have in the soap films, but then make a digital version of it, like a digital way of showing turbulent patterns. And also this came forward from we were going traveling through Portugal. We had this idea, like maybe we can buy a small piece of land to have like a test ground for these kinetic and solar installations. And then when we were driving, this was the summer that there was a lot of fires in Portugal. And then I realized, I saw this picture of a fire tornado. That was and I was like, wow, like so. Also here, this duality of like, wow, it's so beautiful, and like how a fire, and also like the destructiveness of it. So these two things, like liquid, solid, like it can both be there. And so this, and also like I have this database where I have a collection of all these things that relate to turbulence or erosion, or and also this one, this is the storm on Jupiter, shot by the Juno probe. So when I got asked to make a permanent work, you go to the location, and it was still like a building place. So I said, yeah, I have to do some experiments because otherwise I cannot relate to this space. So I worked with I did a test together with some people to see how it could make like a tornado in that. So this was the video I showed. And like, no, this was a test of the plastic sheet. Something else. This is also, but it allowed me to create, to find like the right shapes, and like what I said about working small and then big again. This also for this was very important. And so, yeah, although it's like a piece that it's without sound, of course. It's like I made 3 hours of films dealing with fluid dynamics and turbulent patterns and I had two programmers build this beautiful video synthesizers where I could implement my images that I took in my videos, and then play with it and make compositions and make so I made like 22 separate films, and they are shown in a random order, like 24/7.
Where did you shoot the images from?
So this is the database that I made over the last years over traveling. So this is actually the image of a jellyfish that I shot in Monterey. You have like this aquarium with jellyfish. So it's a jellyfish, and then this is what it became like a film about. So it's all abstract films, but it's not only aesthetically nice, but you see also like sometimes it's a raging fire, and sometimes it's like small drops of water. So also in these this turbulence became like sort of a metaphor for the way I was feeling, like or how I see the world now, like the turbulence we're in, the turmoil, and yeah. So
as a metaphor for the society that we live in now, or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's like I think it's sort of it's a metaphor that works really well for me, like to deal with these feelings of despair and but also joy, and like it's also beautiful, and it's also so yeah, it's many things for me in one.
Yeah, it's interesting because the images that are on here, they look super abstract to me, and at the same time when you say, oh, it's a jellyfish, like you know, and it's beautiful because it's shots of nature, but somehow it's zoomed in, zoomed out, it has different colors, and it makes it, to know that, if I hear you share that, then it makes me relate to the images differently, because then...
Yeah, and I think on another level you do relate to it, like some people see the like lava in it, or like fire tornadoes, and so, I mean, I like also that people see their own things in it, and they have their own associations, but what I like is most when it connects, when the...
Yeah, it's very beautiful. Because this is a permanent work, right? So it's very site-specific to this place. Like, does that, as being an artist, does that create new challenges?
Yes, this was a very big challenge. It took 3 years to make, and of course I didn't make it myself. I worked with a team, and I think, like, I always collaborate with people, but very on a peer-to-peer base. And now you have to start to work with a company that can work on this scale. And so for me, it was in everything of times 10. The budget, the scale. Well, I chose to make it this big, so it's also me. But yeah. So this was quite intense, this project. Like, you have to figure out, like, again, I'm working with a new technology, the flexible LEDs. You have to figure out how it works. You have to find the child diseases. You have to, yeah, and you do this luckily together with people. So,
who in this space saw this in Groningen?
oh wow,
That's
Almost everyone. Yeah. I heard it was difficult to find.
Yes.
Yeah?
It's also really expensive if you go with your car.
Yeah? I still want to do that, because the architect did it on the first day that the car park was open. He said it's great, you can spiral around it. Still have to do that.
We'll be out in 10 minutes and it's not that expensive.
Okay, yeah. Great.
Yeah, so it's still there. So if there's people in the space who are like, I never saw this before.
yeah. Actually, it's almost 5 years there now in November. Yeah, and it's just they just did a cleanup because of all the cars, the exhaustion. Yeah, replaced some dead LEDs, and yeah, so it's fresh and shiny again. Yeah,
It's amazing. Maybe because we're coming to a close of our talk, not to the night, but our talk. Maybe is there a question from the audience? Otherwise, I'm going to ask the last question.
Yes, please.
Of this parking garage, If they have, do they have to maintain and deal with it after it's done? Or
Yeah, they do the maintenance.
But like I said, only 2 months ago, the first maintenance was done. There was some other maintenance because there were some problems in the garage, but not to the installation. So yeah, I was really happy with this.
It would be really like big responsibility and stress to make it that it's permanent, right?
Yeah, for me this was
like if you make kinetic works or working with technology. So the question was also not to make a permanent work, as it had to work for 5 years, which I hope will. But yeah, this is completely different than what I like. After each show, I revise the work and have to change motors, or you know, there's always something you have to keep on. So, like I said, with Solace, I stopped doing this after 2016 because it was also time to move on, right? So, but yeah, with these works, it's not for the longevity. So, to suddenly start to think about something that is semi-permanent, or yeah, that's quite difficult when it comes to mechanics, and yeah.
Especially if it's like digital and some.
also, yeah,
Fixed in
yeah,
metal.
yeah. I had to keep into account.
Earthquakes. So it's, maybe I can show. So the way it's now, I didn't think of this, but the engineer who made the construction made it like a swing. Yeah. So I think somebody said, one of the engineers that had to supervise it, like, I think if there's an earthquake, this thing will still be standing or hanging. Yeah.
That's also turbulence, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And very unstable, yeah. Yeah, maybe as a closing question, I'm very curious because your career has had its own path and it's still going, of course. I'm curious if there's something that you thought to be true when you started as an artist that now maybe you think differently about after years of doing your practice.
I think in working with technology, I think that in the beginning, I remember that it was always, my work was always put in the realm of new media art, but I think I quickly realized, like, I'm not making new media art. Like the media I'm working with is not really new. It's actually old media. It's like I'm making these old projectors, and of course I'm using new technology like an Arduino or sensors, or which allow also different things. But I think this implication of new media art, yeah, I think it implies, like in working with new technologies, that it's new, but it's not new. It's like it's been done before. Like a lot of my inspiration comes from art from the 60s and the 70s, and from artists that were again inspired by artists from the 20s. So, yeah, I think, and it's always like a continuation on previous technology, and I think also in that sense, so I never use this term new media art, or, you know, it's, if anything, it's old media art. And I think also the emphasis on technology, like for me the work is not about technology. I use technology, it's a tool like a paintbrush, but it's not about the technology. I think that would be boring. So, and it also has the implication of that it's new because it's new technology, and it's not new. It's been done before. It's like usually it's like this recycling, or like these, like in patterns, in cycles it goes, right? Like, yeah. So I think in the end, for me, it's like, what do you do with it? It's not like a demonstration of technology or a phenomenon. No, it's like to make a composition in time and space, and the composition is for you to be experienced, like a music piece. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well put, beautifully put. All right, thank you so much, Nicky, for spending this time with us.
And thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. I want to invite Joachim actually on stage for a little bit for some announcements.
Yeah, you can stay seated, please. Because before we move on, and you can ask Nicky all the questions that you still have about all her work, while I have your attention, I want to talk about 3 things coming up in the coming weeks. Can we go back to... yes, thank you very much. The first one, and the most important one, the next artist talk. It's on May the 24th with Kimchi and Chips. Who, for those who don't know them, they're a very cool artist duo from Korea and from the UK. They make this amazing light art. They make amazing. It's one that we always wanted to get. So we're very happy. They were in Europe, so that's why it's May. So please join us again. And then Alicia, thank you very much. Yeah. So the first one is keep our website and our social media. Checked it out because we'll post it and all the links and everything. And then the second thing, on May the 2nd, we have Club Forward in Grand Theater, which is a more of an insider artist sort of meet-up place where we can talk about what's going on in Groningen, about new media art and about digital art. People who are working there in it and just share ideas and share what we're doing. And Grand Theater here in Groningen. And for the second or the last thing is I'm going to mispronounce this because it's the and voorheen de gemeente. They're hosting an event in Blokhuispoort and they're talking about internet art. I think it's very cool. One of the people that we're working with a lot from Willow Art Space, which is a digital online art space, they'll be talking there, and a lot of other artists are talking, and a lot of other people who are working on internet art will be presenting there. I'm going. I hope to see you guys as well. Thank you very much.
So you don't have to go home because there will be a little bar and some drinks, and Nicky is around, I am around, WERC is around, so please feel free to stay and ask us any questions you want. Thank you.